Hey everybody, this is Patrick, Nostalgic Cart 78, and today in this video we're going to be doing a very extensive comparison and look at the Masters of the Universe 1986 vintage Eternia compared to the 2024 Origins Eternia. I was kind of curious about the compatibility between the two. I was just curious as to the differences, and so for this video I've actually filmed it in pieces, comparing every single component. I hope I haven't left any stone unturned. This is going to be a long video. I wanted to film it for my own record keeping, but before diving into the individual comparison, I just kind of wanted to film a little bit of footage here, getting you up close and personal. Such an epic playset. And of course, the Origins. Quickly looking at these side by side, you can see how similar they really are. The Masters of the Universe Origins one is a little bit deeper. You can see how the playset is sort of hanging off the front of the table here, whereas over here it does not need to. So without further ado, let's dive into the comparisons. Okay, so comparing the Grayskull Tower, the original versus Origins, you can see right away that the Origins, it is bigger both in circumference as well as it is taller. The next thing that jumps out to me visually is that the monorail supports, while very similar in design, the Origins one, they are gray and look more metal-like, whereas in the vintage one, they're brown. You can sort of see the nuts and bolts, but they also have a slight impression of wood as well because they are brown, versus this, which is the silver, which gives you the metal impression, but also there's like stone sculpting in here that is not over here. So you can also see these kind of really, there is a slight little wiggle to the supports, but they really lock in, they click in. Whereas these, there's quite a bit of flexibility to them. They're not fragile, but they definitely have movement to them. The dungeon door here is arched versus over here, it definitely has a bit more of an angular design. The same goes for the stonework on this, much more of an angular design here versus on this. It's very organic, much like we see in the original Castle Grayskull. And that happens all the way around on both of these, much more intentionally sculpted, almost brick-like, whereas over here, like I said, it's just got a bit more of an organic vibe. You do still have the same action feature, so anything that's running across the monorail will come across. You will have it eventually hit this ball and chain. The ball and chain will release and the dungeon door will come down shut. This is a much longer chain. The ball is much more like medieval. The other thing that's interesting that I actually prefer about the vintage is this little piece here that sort of allows for this booby trap, so to speak, to happen. It's much smaller. Over here, this is a very large gray piece of plastic, and from certain angles, it almost completely blocks the window. Here, it's much lower, and from any angle, you still always have line of sight to the window here. Talking about the window, you can also see that here, this is a hollow tower, versus over here, the window it's actually a sticker. I do think that they probably could have done something over here so that you could have put a figure in, but even spinning this around and looking at the back, there is not a floor in there anyway, so nothing could sit there anyways. But flipping this around, you can see one of the biggest differences is the backside of the tower. This is much larger here to allow and accommodate for this additional play feature here. There's a dungeon grate door here on the top. And when you have a figure standing on top of it, you can actually flip this lever here and they will fall into the dungeon. Then there's also a little switch here on this door that you can flip and you can get your figure out. You can put this dungeon back up. You also get to see here that the inside of the Origins actually has a floor that has sculpted detail in it. Whereas over here on the vintage one, there is actually nothing going on except this really cool wrapping around the entire tower spiral staircase. These stairs are super, super tiny. So if I get a figure, you can see here that the stairs are not even the size of one of his feet. They're super, super tiny. Over here, they're slightly larger, and even without being able to use the stairs, you can use the top of this. So you also get this space here for figures and play space that you don't get over here. On the back side of the original, another sticker. I always thought this was really cool. It's a subtle detail, but it's just a set of eyes peering out. Again, examples of what I was talking about. This is extremely organic here, these rocks and stones. Like we always say this when we talk about the original Masters of the Universe line. It's not that this isn't necessarily organic, but there's more three-dimensional quality to this. You can see, like looking at this at the side, like this bumps out and it's just very three-dimensional, whereas over here, it's sculpted maybe to look organic, but it's flat. Whereas over here, you know, it looks like it was maybe sculpted by hand in clay. And I love that look. You can also, just taking a look at the paint decos, see that the coloring is very, very similar. Here you do have a black wash on top of just the green and the light green. Over here, there's more of a gray molded plastic that sort of ends with the base, and then the green, and then the light green. I thought that I would much prefer this ball here with these little spikes. It certainly makes more sense that this would be more in line with the Masters of the Universe world, right? It's a little more barbaric, but there's something about this constant mixture of sorcery and barbarianism with sort of a little slight nod to something that's potentially higher tech. And for whatever reason, that's what I think of when I see this ball and chain. Inside the dungeon on the vintage here, there is no floor. So you're seeing the table wood grain here. Whereas in this one, that has that actual sculpted plastic floor. Taking a look at the tops of the towers, there is room in both of these for figures to stand. This one is shallower. You can see in here, it comes just above knee height. Whereas if I bring Zodak over here, it comes up to his hips. The circumference is smaller in this one. It's definitely bigger in this one. I really like that you can put at least a figure in this one, and in this one, you get 2 figures easily. The connection point where the tower connects to the central tower is very similarly done in design. However, they are not compatible, meaning you cannot connect an Origins tower to a vintage central tower. You cannot connect the original Grayskull tower to the Origins central tower. They are very, very, very similar in size, but there is different clearances underneath each of these that prevent the interchangeability of the towers. So there is your front-facing view, side view. Here you can also see that there's a new window that's sculpted here. Here's a look at the backs and the final side. The monorail supports are not interchangeable. They have a different way. Each of them have a different way that they click in to the tower itself. The brown plastic for the doors is slightly different, and also the chain connects in the middle here versus over here they did it to the side. And I do see why they did that, because when you do lift this door up, you can only get it so high before it hits the monorail support, and it can't actually fully raise. Versus over here, you can lift it all the way up, and because there's this sort of split here in the actual door itself, it can go all the way up, and you can easily get your whole hand through the door frame. Okay, so I think that covers the Grayskull Tower, and let's move on to the next section. Okay, taking a look at the Viper Tower. Here you can see that the Viper Tower in the original is just slightly shorter than the Origins. The Origins does also look maybe bigger in circumference, but only slightly. In the original Viper Tower, the monorail supports are a really dark gold, and like the Grayskull Tower, there is a bit more movement and give to these versus over here with the Origins. They kind of lock in and they move, but they're definitely much more locked in. Over here, they're this sort of bright yellow gold, and that kind of carries up into the collar, the sort of chain collar around the neck. You can also see that the chains that connect to the monorail supports, they are real metal chains on both. This is a reproduction set. I don't have the original chains, but they looked very, very similar to this. This is a nice reproduction set here. One of my favorite things about the original Viper Tower is this sort of ledge here, as well as this sort of snake sculpting and weapons. You can see over here that snake, there's a snake sculpted in, the weapons are here still. Also, the sculpting on the snakes is equal in terms of where there is sculpting, but over here in the Origins version, it is more defined. However, there is definitely a lot of sculpted detail here. It is a little bit softer. You can even see it up in the faces. The head of the original Viper Tower is actually much larger. I don't know if you can tell. This one's actually much larger than this one. This is much more skinny and narrow through here. This one sort of gets wider as you get closer up to the mouth. And I do like the single two fangs and the forked tongue over here. With both towers, the heads spin all the way around, and you can manually do that by grabbing a hold of them. Or looking at the back side of these, you can see you can actually reach your hand in and sort of grab the base of the snake and spin this around 360 degrees. Over here, that base is extended down into a bit of a handle, and it allows you to not only spin 360 degrees, but if you actually pull down on it, the actual head comes down, opens its mouth, and sort of has this striking action feature. You can also see that in terms of paint, they were hit the same way. So you've got almost an identical brown, blacks being used. The red is deeper in the original. You also have this purple hit that was used, and that same purple is used over here. And you also, with the Origins, get a fully sculpted floor, whereas again, over here, like the Grayskull Tower, that is just the tabletop in here. You can also see that this triangular piece here actually has a hole in it. So you can actually put a figure on the other side of this, and they can be peering out through the mountain to the exterior landscape. That triangular space is here, but they did close it off. There's not an actual hole there. You can't put a figure in there to look out. Here we have the side, and then we have the backs. I do think it's interesting that this was made out, this pole is blue. This is the only place there is this blue plastic in this whole component. And then the final side view. And I think that covers our look at the Viper Tower. Okay, so taking a look at the central tower, the first glaring thing to me is that the bases are very different. The Origins base is a solid dark gray. The vintage one is more of a metallic gray on top of that icy blue base. That stands out in person even probably more so than maybe the camera is catching. If you look at the gargoyles, the gold gargoyles, how the Origins gargoyles are taller, and that is because this base is actually taller. And there's also this added sort of sloping detail here to this, where this is flat. On the vintage Eternia here, the jaw feature moves up and down just like this one does, but this one, the jaw is independent of the arms, whereas this one, the jaw and the arms move at the same time. You can see that the gold used on the gargoyles is slightly different. Again, this is more of a dark gold color versus over here, it's more of that sort of yellow-orange gold. You can see all over this playset, these little foot pegs have been added because Origins figures have footholes so that this helps them to stand. Whereas obviously with the vintage set, they didn't have footholes, so the orientation of the paws is different. They're sort of more in that grab pose by default, whereas over here they're kind of resting, sort of palm down. You can see here in the back where this side would connect to Grayskull Tower is arched with a little archway. That is the case over here as well, but a little less tall, less pronounced. Also, you can see that one side of the Eternia Tower is sort of hit with a black paint, just like a wash on the one side here. And that is the case over here, although it is far less pronounced. Over here, you get hit much heavier with that metallic silver coloring, which is really beautiful in person when the light hits it. That happens as well on this side. But like the dark side, it's a little less pronounced. You can see the difference. Look at all the silver here, how much less there is here. You can also see that the paws are much, much larger here, and these get hit really hard with the silver. Whereas over here, they are smaller, and they do get hit with the silver. The lion face here is so stunning on the origins. And you can see the sculpting is extremely similar over here. These eyes almost look a little bit more orange and a little less yellow. And then moving up the tower, you can see that the monorail supports here are blue, and they're essentially identical. But like the other two towers, they are not interchangeable because of the way that they connect to the tower is completely different. And I've got the gold ladder accessory hanging on the front here. I'm going to do a separate accessories comparison. We've got windows on both. On the Origins one, the screws are on the back side of it, so they're not visible from the front. Whereas over here on the Vintage one, you do have a screw here and a screw here that is visible from the front. You can see the sort of detailing under the turret is still intact on both playsets. And that brings us up to the flags. The flags are really quite interesting because in all of the playsets from the Vintage line, the flags were stickers. So these are double-sided stickers. The flags are plugged into these little clips that can be slid around and moved wherever you want them to be. But I'll pull this one down so you can see my stickers are in pretty good shape. They're double-sided. And what I like about these clips is, one, you can move them wherever you want. The flags are two-sided, so they are different on both sides, different coloring, same image, but different coloring. And they can sort of lay sort of down, they can stand straight upright. There's different holes in those little clips. There's also a fourth clip. You got 4 clips, and that fourth clip is used for one of the weapons, which I'll show when I do the weapons comparison. But they're just super sharp. I love the line art. I love the colors. So like I said, this one is this sort of steel blue with an orange swan, and then you've got a red with, it looks like a swan maybe, and red with a whiter swan. Then you have the dragon, looks like a dragon, purple, orange, blue, red. And then over here you have this lion or cat or some kind of cat. You have orange, red, and purple, yellow. And this is what they look like. They just unclip, and then you can just sort of affix them into their little slot. And they just sort of stay. Here on the Origins one, they are cloth. And so they are basically just, you know, you see one side is printed very richly, and then you're kind of getting the reverse of it on the other side. It's not so much of a two-sided flag as much as it is this material. This cloth is just thin enough that you're getting to see the other side. And the flags actually they actually are, you know, on a plastic pole that's, once that you click them in, they're stuck here. You don't move them around. The cloth is nice, but I will say I am definitely much more of a fan of the stickers. They're sharper. The artwork is sharper. The colors are different. They're double-sided. Here you do get, you know, really nice cloth flags, but you can't move them around, and they are one-sided. And again, I've got this accessory up here. I'll cover this when I compare them both together, but they're just up at the top right now. Down here with these gargoyles, you can see this one is attached, but this one sort of slides, and it slides to reveal this little hidden compartment and this spider web in here. The drawbridge just has to be manually lifted up, and you can see inside the moat here, you've got the little gold stingray, and you have weapons sculpted in. You also have this creature here, which we've in the present day named MOTU, and he is the moat monster, and you can see that he's just sculpted into the base of this. You also have more weapons and things sculpted in over here. One thing I've always thought was so super cool is you've got the power sword. I don't know if you can see that, but that's the power sword sculpted in. You also have this feature here where if you grab a hold of this and pull it forward, it will stay right in place, but the paws or the arms of the lion come in and they'll grab a figure and pull it right into the mouth. And I do like that you can kind of have this in either or position, so closed or open. That same feature is available over here, but here you can see it actually also controls the jaw. And there's this sort of movement that happens with the paws where it's like they come up and they actually grab and the jaw opens up. And this looks like an orb of power. Instead of it just being a lever, it actually is a sculpted detail, which is kind of cool. The other thing that is super interesting about this is the one that flips up to reveal sort of the spider web. There isn't really a hole here to put any weapons, but the spider web is here. So they moved that over to here. And this one, when you pull on it, activates the drawbridge, which if you look down in here, you see those same sculpted details that we saw before. This time the blue is a different color blue. And you see less of it because these paws are so big. I mean, these are huge. I have big hands. This is like a small child's hand. But the paws being in this position hide a lot of the moat, and you can't lock this into place. Like it bounces back. So they just sort of are always in this resting position. But interestingly, MOTU came as an action figure this time. So you get a fully articulated moat monster here that you can kind of put wherever you want. And there is no sculpted relief there. And instead you get this action figure of MOTU, which is really, really, really cool. You can also see that the gold stingray is here, and that's exactly like the gold stingray from the vintage one. And you can actually see power sword is there. But here you can, if I zoom out, you can see the color difference. This is much more of a shiny teal blue green, and this is a flat matte, almost sky blue. And that is your look at the front. Okay, now we've moved around to the back here. The first thing that jumps out to me right away is the elevator shaft on the Origins. It now includes a lot of sculpted details, whereas over here, it's pretty simplistic. I like these little, I don't know what this would be. It almost looks like a ladder. The elevator shaft is much skinnier here. It's much wider here. The sticker details are the exact same though, like this little sticker here. Over the monorail support is almost essentially the same as the one that's here. Actually really like this too, this sort of piping here. Here you've got actual piping. Starting at the top and looking sort of at the floors, you can see the stickers here, Origins, and you can see that they are the exact same over here. And both floors are textured. You'll be able to see the stickers. You'll notice on the Origins one, there are these holes here. And let me grab the gold ladder. This was, I think, an awesome addition. You'll see these little holes are great for adding this ladder to the back of the playset. So you can put the ladder here. You can put the ladder here. You can put the ladder on really all the floors in the same configuration, which is just awesome. Now you can put the other ladder on the original one over in the same way, but there's no holes for it to sit. So it's just sort of balancing. So you would never be able to hang a figure off of it this way. Whereas it visually works and it's kind of cool. But over here, you could actually have your figures climbing the ladder, and this ladder's not going anywhere because it's locked into these holes. When we move down a floor here, we can see that there's this wooden looking rack in here. That is the weapons rack. That is very different than the vintage weapons rack. Weapons, and I will be doing a comparison of those. You can also see that there's this training fighting horde statue that moves back and forth here, and this is so that you can have your heroic warriors practicing their battle moves here against this thing. In moving this, you're also controlling the next floor down. You're controlling the chair of the computer room. As I spin this, you're controlling this. Instead of a training dummy here, over here you just have this gold knob that controls the chair. You can see there's the chair and a computer panel in here and some stickers on the floor. And it's a pretty tight area, but you can put a figure in there. And that is identical to the vintage one. See this, the round sticker here and the colorful sticker here on the side. Round sticker there, colorful sticker on the side. Even the computer panels have the same sticker design, and the floor has the same sticker design. And both floors are textured. This one's got more of like an orange peel texture. This one has that, but it's a bit finer. And then going to the ground floor, you'll see the backside of the jaw. You'll see some stickers in there of like a skull and key and treasure chest and maps, like an owl and a crystal ball. And again, with a very textured, like brick looking floor. Same thing over here. On the origins, you've got the owl with the crystal ball, the skull with the key and the map, and a softer sculpted floor. But on the floor with the computer, do you see that little like lever there? That is how you control on the vintage Eternia the jaw. And what's cool is it locks into place, and then when you unlock it, you can actually open the jaw up and down, and the jaw locks upright. So if I go back around, you can see that I can actually have the jaw completely closed, revealing the entrance over here. Now I can do that in the Origins version, but you actually just have to manually push it closed. And then again, to get it to stay open. And worth noting, here you can see that the jaw opens wide when it's open over here, where over here it's really only about half open. The only time this Origins jaw ever really looks like that is when you pull the lever activating the feature, because the jaw retracts back to make room to sort of suck the figures in. See that? Whereas over here, you can kind of just keep it in that position. They both have elevators. The elevators are essentially identical to each other, although the new one is larger. There's a knob here, and there's foot pegs, and when you turn it, just sort of crank it, it moves from the ground floor to the first floor, and then it keeps going all the way up to the second floor, and then that's where it stops. And then over here, same thing. You'll see here, this is more of a mustard plastic, and there are 3 stickers on it. This is that dark gold plastic on the vintage, and the same 3 stickers, same knob, and we go from the ground floor to the first floor, and then up to the second floor. And here you can kind of see, probably, yeah, the color difference. The only other thing I wanted to highlight is these bridges. The Origins bridge was purposely designed to connect here to the back side, which makes a central tower even deeper. The difference being with the vintage one, there were promotional images that showed that bridge back here, but it doesn't lock in, so you can actually move this to the front of the playset and have it connect over to the Viper Tower. You can have it go from the Viper Tower over to Snake Mountain. You can move this wherever you want. So I kind of like the flexibility that this one has. And that is the back side of the Origins and the Vintage towers. One, Vintage accessories, Origins accessories. So first up, most of the accessories are identical. There are a couple exceptions, but I will say that in this respect, Mattel did pretty much a one-to-one. But there are a couple differences, so let's just dive right in. So looking at the ladders, you can see this is the vintage ladder here. This is the new Origins ladder. So with the vintage, you have sort of this darker, more bronzier gold, almost a copper in a way. And then here in the Origins, you have that more bright yellow gold. The vintage ladder is more delicate, definitely more delicate. The handles are smaller. Honestly, I would never hang a figure off of one of these hooks. You see these often with rungs sort of broken off. Can only imagine how easy that is to do. This is much larger, and the plastic is a much more durable plastic. As far as the details, you can see it's really identical. All the rungs are the same. The rivets up the front here, the center are the same. The heads are even the same. You can see here. The backs, very similar. This is sort of smooth and flat. This has got sort of a channel down the center here, but really very, very, very similar. So that's the ladder. I'm gonna jump to this little piece here. This is not a weapon, but this is the clip that clips to the monorail that activates the prison transport action feature. When the prison transport is going around the monorail, a piece of it hits this sort of lever that's connected to the monorail, and that activates sort of the trap door that's on the bottom of the prison transport, dropping the figure down out of it. This is the vintage, which is blue and much smaller. Very simple. This is the Origins, which is gray and much larger. This is a very hard plastic. This is a more flexible plastic. Exact same design, just different sizes, different colors. Next up, we have the hooks, of which there are 4 of them. These affix to a Masters of the Universe figure, the wrist area of a figure, and then you can hang the figure off of the monorail. This is the vintage one here. All the vintage gray is very close to the Origins gray. You can see the Origins gray is maybe slightly darker. They also feel pretty close to the same plastic. They're both a pretty rigid plastic. The only difference I've been able to see on these is the vintage one has sort of this part number here, and the Origins one does not. And this brings us to our next change. Before we look at the rest of the sort of weapons, we should look at the weapons racks that came with each. This is the weapons rack that came with the vintage Eternia. It stands upright on its own. The front of it has sort of this wood grain sticker situation going on the front. And the back has a computer panel with some cool artwork. And this is, a freestanding piece. So it stands on the table. It's got these hooks on it that you can hang weapons on, as well as holes here to stick the weapons in. In the Origins Eternia, they switched it up and they made this the weapons rack. This weapons rack also can stand on its own, but it really wasn't designed, I don't think, to stand on its own as much as it is. On the back side, you can see these pegs. This actually affixes to the 3rd floor of the central tower, right inside where the windows are. The weapons are able to sort of be plugged into these holes. So these are the 2 weapons racks. I think there's pros and cons to both. I think it's great that this one is built right into the tower. I actually do really like the 2-sided feature here with this weapons rack, and I do also like that this can sort of be placed anywhere inside the Eternia playset or exterior to it. This one is definitely more intentionally designed to be in that one specific space in the central tower. The weapons are all pretty much a one-to-one exact. I really think they must have used the same mold. I don't see, just looking at them through the camera, any massive differences, except on the Origins ones, which are a darker gray. You'll see here they each have this handle for the action figures to hold on to. But then on all of the Origins ones, on the back side, you'll find another peg, and that allows it to be affixed to this weapons rack. So you would use that peg, and you can literally plug it in right there, and now it's not moving, and it's on the weapons rack. This is the sword gun, very popular piece. The new one's interesting in that it does have the blade has actually got a gloss treatment on it and a metallic treatment so that it actually does stand out a little bit more. Here you can see this is just the same plastic molded throughout. Another difference you can see here, the vintage one has the numbering on it. The Origins one does not. And again, when I flip this over, you will see that the vintage one does not have the extra peg. The Origins one does have this extra peg. And I think, there's probably no real rhyme or reason to plugging these into the weapons rack, but see, there you go. The vintage Eternia did come with one of these guns, which does plug into the top of the central tower with the clips. Let me grab the clip. So I showed the clips before when I was showing the flags, but these are the clips that the flag poles go into on the vintage Eternia. There were 4 of these included with the vintage Eternia, and they just clip on, and then you can actually use these holes to plug the weapon in. So let me see if I can get this in here. Pretty tight, there we go. So this would basically clip onto the top of Eternia, and that way from the central tower you could have a character up there shooting this gun down. But you do need this clip, of which again there are 4 of them. 3 for the 3 flags, and then 1 for this gun. The Origins version, again, identical. And in this instance, there isn't an extra peg, so these are just identical. But they did go ahead and they actually included 2 of these guns. So vintage came with 1, Origins came with 2. And then here you have the bow that came with the vintage Eternia, and then the bow that came with the Origins Eternia, identical with the exception of this added peg here on the Origins one. And then this is interesting. This is the crossbow from the vintage Eternia, and this is sort of the top side of the crossbow. Again, it's in all the same gray. You can see the numbering over here, and on the underside, you've got the handle, the part here for the figure to hold. In this one, the top side of it is actually far less detailed. You can see that. But if you flip it over, all the detail is on the underside, and this is the peg that you would use to hold, the figure would use to hold it. And so when I flip this one over, this is the plain side, and on this one, all that detail is on the under. I don't know if that was done intentionally or not, because this does look like it should be the top of the crossbow, as it is in the vintage, but you can see here that the handle is on this side of it, so the figures will actually hold it inverted, and they'll hold it this way. When you do flip it over and look at the details this way, they are very, very similar. And then on the vintage Eternia, you have this interesting, I don't know, people call it a harp. It almost looks like something out of Gwildor's workshop. It's kind of an interesting piece. The figures hold the underside here with this part. You can see the gears and the moving parts, and then this is the top side of it where you can see the numbers. This is the Origins version. You can see here on the Origins version, the details are not quite as sharp, but they are the same. And when you flip it over, you get the same details as well as the handle. But then again, on this, you get this extra peg again to put it in the weapons rack. And that leaves 1 weapon left from the Origins set, and that is this gold shield, and this did not come with the vintage Eternia. And here you can see the weapons rack for Origins with all of the weapons mounted to it, with the exception of the extra gun. We're out of places on this for this to go. You can sort of, you know, hook it. You could kind of hook it to something else. There you go. So, and that is the Origins weapons on the weapons rack. Now let's take the vintage weapons rack and put everything on that. Okay, here you can see the weapons on the vintage weapons rack, and then over here on the Origins weapons rack that holds everything and looks like a proper weapons rack, as does this one, maybe a little more organized, but still full of weapons. Both very, very cool. But there is your look at the weapons and the weapons rack, and really the small accessories that come with the Eternia playsets. Okay, now we're going to take a look at the monorail vehicles, and that all starts with what powers those monorail vehicles, which is this little gizmo here. This is the motor, and this is the vintage motor, and this is the Origins motor. Right away, you can see the Origins motor is larger, but really the same sort of functions are here. And you can see you've got the wheel here. On the vintage one, it's black. On the Origins one, it's sort of a putty gray color. Just looking at the fronts here, you have the switch that turns the vintage one on. You have the switch that turns the Origins one on. And that highlights a difference. The Origins one is much quieter. This is sort of the front view, the bottom view. Flip it over here. You can see the guide that helps to keep it on the actual monorail itself is red in the vintage, and it's sort of a dark brownish red here in the Origins. Here, when you turn it to the side, you can see the battery components. They both take batteries. This vintage one, this sort of just, you kind of have to pop it up and slide it out. It's pretty delicate. These break pretty easily, so I'm not going to do it here. But on the Origins one, it is just a actual cover that you screw on. Flip it around to the back. This little weapon on the vintage one, which does pop off, it is its own little weapon, and it was designed to sort of be plugged in to the motor. So that way, when it is taking whatever vehicle it's taking around the monorail, it has its own weapon, which is super cool. Interestingly, the Origins did come with this exact same weapon and the ability to plug it in, but there is nowhere on this for this to get plugged into the motor, which is where it originally was. You can use it on one of the vehicles, however, and I'll show that in a minute. But yeah, I think it's too bad. I mean, there's a couple holes here. It's too bad this can't be mounted on to the motor like it was originally, but it is included. And this last side here gives you a good view here of the size difference. And that is your look at the motors. Now let's take a look at these vehicles. This vehicle is probably the most iconic for this set. They are slightly different sizes. This one is a little taller. The vintage one is a little taller. The Origins one's a little lower profile, but that's about it in terms of size difference. It's very, very subtle. Let me give you a look at the vintage one first. So you've got this very clear plastic windshield here on the front. You can see inside that there are some stickers. This is the top, this is the side, this is this side, and the back. The back opens right up. More stickers. And then this is the underside of it, and it does have wheels on the underside of it because you could also use this as a vehicle along the ground. The Origins one is exactly the same, but you can see that the color in the plastic is a little different. Now this one probably was a brighter white, but it has aged. This one is more of a putty gray. This one, the windshield does actually pop, it's on a hinge, and it does open up. as well as the back opens up just like the other. So you can get a figure in both the front or in the back, which is kind of cool. So there's a top comparison, side comparison. You can see that the weapons are the exact same, but this is where I was saying you can actually pop this one off. And if you want to use the other one, you can pop that on. So you can use it on that if you want to. Back comparisons. Darker plastic used. Bottom comparison. There are the red wheels on the vintage, white wheels on the Origins. The motor mount on the top here is slightly different. And this one, the Origins one, I will say is nice because it slides on and you can hear it lock. Hear that? Now it's on there. The vintage one slides on, but it does not lock. It just kind of hooks on the vintage, whereas it's actually affixed on the Origins. But that is your look at this vehicle. Okay, the vintage prison transport, the Origins prison transport, and again, very, very similar, although on this, you can actually see that in the Origins one, they did add a lot of sculpted detail that is just smooth plastic in the vintage one. So here, this entire roof, this opens up to put a figure in, this opens up to put a figure in, but you can see this detailing here that is missing from over on the vintage one. You can see that they both have this release lever here that gets activated and drop a figure out of it. These are the same, except on the vintage one, it's much smaller. It's larger on the Origins one. Again, like the jet vehicle, you can see that the motor mount is slightly different. And like before, the motor clicks and locks onto the top of this versus this one where it just slides on. Looking at the fronts, the stickers are even identical. On the vintage, it's slightly larger. And again, you get more sculpted in the actual plastic detailing over on this one. On the underside here, you see more of that sculpting and stickers, whereas you don't have any on this one. And on the back side here, you get a sticker on the vintage one and sculpted details over here on the Origins one. And then on the side, you get the exact same sticker. You get as well, again, a lot more sculpted details over here that are just smooth plastic here. Obviously the plastic over here is a darker purple. This is a brighter purple. Is a look at the prison transport vehicle for Eternia. Okay, lastly, you get the sled here that attaches to the motor as well and allows figures to sort of be nestled inside there and kind of sail across the monorail like this. These are very, very similar as well. Same consistent sculpting throughout with the exception of the attachment on the top. This is the top-down view. This is the side view. You can see on the Origins one, it's a double barrel. On the vintage one, it's a single barrel. You can see the handle sculpting is different here. This is a little more rounded edging, and this is a little, well, I guess it's pretty similar, but this one's a little more pronounced rounding. This is the underside. This, in the vintage one, was a standalone and could only be used on the monorail. In the Origins one, you can actually attach this to the top of the prison transport just by sliding it in there. They added this little connecting piece here, and that way if you're using the prison transport as a freestanding vehicle on its own, you can sit this like on the ground and it becomes sort of its own sort of station, so to speak. And that is your look at the sleds. We've got a few more here to look at. So let's take a look at this super cool sort of design to sit on the top of Central Tower. however, can actually come off and be its own flying vehicle as well. This is the base that's you can mount it to, that can sit right on the top of Central Tower, and you can see it just sort of slides in like so. This is a really hard to find piece when you're looking for a vintage Eternia, is this windshield. It's pretty delicate and it pops off and it breaks pretty easily. I'm thankful mine's in good condition here. But you can see this vehicle also was included in the Origins Eternia. Let's just look at the bases first. So I'm gonna, functions the same way, slides off. And here you can see the bases from the top down, similar stickers, similar design and sculpting. On the side, same thing. Get to the front and look at the top down. You can see there's a lot more sculpted detail in the plastic, where over here on the vintage one, it was just a smooth gray plastic. Those sculpted details are super cool. And from the underside, and that sculpted detail is added on the back as well. Then when we look at the actual vehicle, same detailing, same stickers, even here, same stickers. There's an actual extra sticker on the vintage one that isn't included in the Origins one. Now you can see the sticker is bigger on the vintage one than it is on the Origin one, and that's because you've got this gray button here. You can see that the lasers here on the front are just a sculpted detail, whereas on the Origins one, if you push the gray button on either side, these are actually spring-loaded and have an action feature. And so that is actually super cool. And that is your look at the vintage and Origins laser cannon. We are down to the final accessories here. Let's take a look at the bridges and ramp. So this is the bridge that came with the vintage Eternia. This is the bridge that I showed you earlier that comes with the Origins Eternia. The vintage Eternia one can kind of go anywhere. You can attach it to, or you can set it in front of Viper Tower, you can set it behind the Central Tower, you can put this wherever you want. It doesn't have any sort of locking mechanism. You can see it's a darker brown for the vintage one. The Origins one, you can still sit wherever you want to put it, but it does actually have a clip here where it does clip into place at the back side of the Central Tower. The Origins one is slightly taller, like this. You can kind of see the angle, that it's just that much taller. It has more of an incline. This is a really fun accessory for both vintage and the Origins line, but this is where the accessories end for the Origins line. And with the vintage line, there was another, they call it a ramp. So you had the bridges and then you had a ramp. And this, I'll move these out of the way. This is the ramp that comes with the vintage Eternia. You can see it's kind of got a little curve in it, and it's got sort of these tabs down here on the end, also very fragile. But this can go from the Grayskull Tower sort of out to the front of Eternia. You can actually also put this from the top of the Central Tower. You can lean it at the top of the Central Tower, that like the highest point, and then have it come down and it sort of will click onto the Grayskull Tower. You can then also, if you have a Castle Grayskull, put it one end on the Grayskull Tower over here and have it go all the way across over to the Grayskull. So this has a lot of flexibility and a lot of places that it was able to be used in the vintage Eternia. And this didn't come at all with the Origins Eternia. I think that it's awesome that the vintage Eternia comes with a bridge and a ramp, a Grayskull ramp and a Viper Tower bridge, and the Origins simply came with the bridge. But those are your bridges and your ramps, and that actually wraps up all of the accessories for the Eternia Playsets. Okay, next up I just wanted to quickly show just the visual of the sticker sheet that came with the Masters of the Universe Origins. You can see these stickers, I've used them all and put them all on the playset, but they came quite similar to the vintage one, where they are all numbered so that you can follow the instructions and peel the stickers. This is an unused vintage sticker sheet from the vintage one. I am really thrilled to have this. My vintage Eternia does have all of its stickers on it, but I was able to just purchase this pretty pristine set of stickers. I have them as a backup. I also just think it's cool to be able to see what it looked like when it came back in the day in 1986. You can see all the stickers are here, and it's perforated here, so it came folded in the box like this. So that is a just quick comparison of the sticker sheets. Also, I wanted to show the vintage comic book that comes with the 1986 Eternia versus the comic book that came with the Origins Eternia. You can see here I did have this signed by the author of the story, Joshua, which was really cool. But I love that they both came with mini comics. Here you can see both sets of instructions, vintage instructions, Origins instructions. They both sort of fold open. This is, the vintage one is much more just on sort of an unlaminated paper. And you can see here, it shows all the parts, how to put the stickers on, opens up again, shows you how to assemble the castle, assemble the monorail, and it's double-sided. Very large, and then Origins opens it up. Actually opens up quite large. Shows you, this is in color, and it's on laminated cardstock. Shows you full color, sticker placement. Opens up as well. Assembly continued, the tram vehicles, how to use some of the action features. Here you can see both sets of instructions. I also just wanted to show there is this pamphlet that came called the Eternia Story with the vintage Eternia, and it basically is like a fold-out paper comic where it just highlights the features of Eternia. Let me flip this around. Where it basically highlights the features of Eternia within the playset itself, and also kind of tells a little story at the same time. This has always been one of my favorite line art drawings of Eternia with Castle Grayskull and Snake Mountain. I would also note that the Masters of the Universe Origins Eternia did come with a pretty epic, very large poster that I actually have packed away right now, so I can't show that, but I will see if I can put an image of that on the screen right about now. Okay, one more thing I want to do before I conclude this video is show you the monorail. I've got the jet on here, and this is the vintage one. I'm gonna go ahead and start that up. And now let's go ahead and do the Origins. You can see it's much quieter. And then this is the Origins motor and jet sled on the vintage for those who want to see if it will actually work. It does. So that's actually really cool if you wanted to pick up a modern day Origins or a vintage motor and add it to either of the playsets. And then here we have the vintage motor and jet on the Origins playset. Also works. And I think that concludes my video comparison of the Eternia 1986 playset versus the 2024 playset. I hope you've enjoyed this video and this look at both of these. Please sound off in the comments below and be sure to like and subscribe. And until the next video, good journey.